This is Beyond a Reasonable Doubt with your hosts, Mark Garrigus and Gary Smith.
Well, we welcome to BRD and with GPS and myself. And we swapped out the big show is already downloaded. We're doing a BRD because we're committed to trying to keep as much normalcy as we can. And it's quite a day today. But we've picked, we're going to go from the sublime to the ridiculous. And from the sublime, we'll start off with there was, I believe, 11 so-called oath keepers who were indicted, and it was unsealed, for seditious conspiracy. And interestingly, the history of seditious conspiracy in America is, you have to go back, I suppose, to the Blind Sheik. For the last time there was a seditious conspiracy that was brought back in I believe in the 90s. Then prior to that, famously, there was the Puerto Rican gang is what was referred to, and the shooting and the storming of the Capitol was actually before I was born. And then prior to that, I believe Tokyo Rose, which was when I was growing up, was kind of a famous, iconic, or infamous, I should say, woman who gave aid and comfort to the war effort during World War II, specifically the Japanese. Interestingly, Barack Obama, I believe in 2017, commuted the sentence of the last remaining Puerto Rican member of that group. And prior to that, Harry Truman and that group, I believe, had made an attempt on Truman's life, the Puerto Rican group. Prior to that, Harry Truman had either commuted or pardoned Tokyo Rose. So it's an interesting situation that we have these seditious conspiracies, and then fast forward decades later, and there are the political winds have kind of changed, and then you get commutations or pardons, just something interesting. Today, and by the way, we had talked on the big show about this gentleman, I forget his first name, but his last name is Epps, who's kind of making is quite a figure on the right now. And interestingly, we did our show about Epps and kind of did a deep dive on that the day before these charges were announced. Now, we're going to talk about the head of the Oath Keepers, who was indicted, whose lawyer was on, I believe, CNN today. Correct. Interestingly, I had posited or had speculated, and I think I prefaced it with rank speculation, that the way people were parsing out the words of him and the Twitter by Kinzinger, that it struck me that a more logical kind of explanation for what had happened is he was on the FBI's most wanted list for approximately 6 months, then removed. People say why he was an FBI agent. I think today this unsealing kind of gives some credence to the idea I was suggesting is he was on it. They can now say he didn't go in, he didn't do this, or he didn't do that. I think he was also, if I'm not mistaken, also from Arizona, also affiliated with one of these groups, the militia-style groups, right?
The Phoenix chapter of the Oath Keepers. At least for a time, he was the president of that chapter, and that's something we've been slowly kind of pointing out every time we talk about Ray over the past few months.
Correct. And then today you've got, I believe, this lawyer for one of the gentlemen was also from Arizona, correct?
I believe that is correct, yes.
And also a member you would have thought would have maybe run into or know. And so I'm going to say that they've got all kinds of texts in this indictment. They've got all kinds of other encrypted signal communications. I'm going to go out there on a limb and say that there was some cooperation involved, and that's why he was taken off the FBI's most wanted list, and that's why you have an indictment, and that's why you have all kinds of information that seemingly was between various members of what the DOJ has referred to as a bunch of cells, CELLS,
correct,
right?
Yeah.
So today his lawyer went on to CNN and I think this is worth a watch, and I have a different take than what everybody else does. Not unusual, I suppose.
Absolutely, we've chopped it down, but you can go online and find the full 10 minutes. But we'll play you just two or so minutes that we wanted.
Right, if we played the whole 10 minutes, we wouldn't be beyond.
Yeah, exactly. Here we go.
Tell me how you defend against this. How you defend against all of the planning that is laid out very clearly here in the indictment.
I want to see the entire documents because the planning was about events in Florida. It was about December 12th. It was about November 14th. And it was about their somewhat fanciful idea that they thought the president was going to call them up under the Insurrection Act, which I don't pretend to understand. But they were quite fixated on the idea that Trump was going to activate them as a militia under the Insurrection Act. So we think that most of the quotes are misrepresented. Not to say that serious things didn't happen on January 6th, but their main defense is going to be they weren't the people doing it. They were there to help support.
So what were they reacting? Don't just tell me vaguely what the deep state was doing, which is, I don't even know what you're talking about. What were they reacting to specifically? If you're saying they weren't starting anything.
I think everything from news censorship of certain, the Hunter thing and everything where they felt that the election was being manipulated and then stolen.
It wasn't manipulated or stolen, John.
I think one of the frustrating things as a defense lawyer while watching this is when she wants to correct them. Obviously, I agree. It wasn't manipulated or stolen. But this is against the backdrop, and I'll explain this when we get to the end. It's against the backdrop of their mental state is in a criminal case in play. This is not strict liability. You don't get to go out there and say, let's storm the Capitol and just that there is no defense to that. There is a defense to that. It's the mental state. So when she says it wasn't manipulated, that's fine. That's your completely reasonable belief. I understand that. But if they have a honest yet unreasonable belief, guess what that does to their mental state when you're charging them with a seditious conspiracy? And that is something that I'm going to predict is going to come to play. Let's go on and I'll opine on that.
At the time was they think that this is all going bad and it's not us doing it, but we're going to have to do something about it.
Okay, well then responding to an imaginary thing is not a defense.
Pause. Yes, on the contrary, it is a mental defense to the element and the state of mind as charged. So that is just, and by the way, everybody on the internet is applauding this as a complete dunk of the lawyer. I'll dunk on the lawyer. It's because he's not pushing back against her because it is an element of the mental state is always an element. By the way, there are Supreme Court and Circuit Court cases in tax fraud cases, where you get the tax fraud crazies. I'm not a sovereign citizen. The mental state in those cases, in a tax fraud case, is at play. So if you think a seditious conspiracy does not have a mental state and somehow it's strict liability, you're missing the whole point of how to prove a criminal case.
Mark, I'm going to call you one day soon, and we're going to file that taxes are unconstitutional lawsuit. I'm tired of it, so look out for that. All right, let's finish up here.
Well, it depends. Like I say, the seditious conspiracy charge, the last time it was tried in 2010, it was thrown out by a judge because they said that, political diatribe were not seditious conspiracy.
Yeah, I've gone through that case, John. Not at all. John, that is apples and watermelons. That is not a case.
Actually, it's not apples and watermelons. It's, once again, they said the character of the speech rendered that case infirm. Just because the facts are different doesn't take away from you have to still talk about the mental state in the speech.
Yep, absolutely. All right.
It's so frustrating, but go on.
Let's finish up here.
Look at. All right, that is not a case that you can look at and say it has anything that is similar to what happened on January 6th. That would be an embarrassing defense to use in court.
I beg to differ. Who's jumped the shark there is hers truly. Anyway, so I said we're going from the sublime to the ridiculous. Next up, this has been all over the internet, and it deserves a little attention because it's just mind-boggling to me. But you know what? It's not that unusual. I've been there in courtrooms where these kinds of things have happened, and you just shake your head and you wonder. It's kind of one of the things that Adam rants about with great frequency.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, before we get to that, I'd like to ask a question that I think Adam will ask just so that I can get a little bit ahead of it. What, from a legal perspective, is the difference with choosing seditious conspiracy, that's what it was, right, versus actually charging insurrection?
Well, that's a very good question, because basically when you start with conspiracy, you're linking together a group of people. And they always talk about conspiracy, that you don't have to know what one of your other co-conspirators is doing as long as you committed an act in furtherance of that conspiracy. So I have seen, and if you watch the whole 10 minutes, you'll see the lawyer say, and I've heard other people say today, well, I didn't know what this guy was doing, or I didn't know. That really doesn't matter if you're at the hub. You're linked, and then there's what's called the spokes on the outside. Seditious conspiracy is kind of the best way to put it is, are you committing sedition, and is there ample evidence to show that there was a meeting of the minds to do that? And many of the texts that they put there would appear to show that there was a meeting of the minds. Clearly, the texts that were put up there, the government has put together weaved together a damning indictment.
Going back to months and months to
months, exactly. They talk about the training September 30th. They talk about the December dates. But remember also, that's the indictment. Now, if you put them in context, and if you're tying these things together, but they're not in context, and you're weaving it, that's a completely different situation. And that's what lawyers and trials are for.
Absolutely. Okay. Sorry. Thank you for that answer. It was very satisfying, and sorry to take you off track. Let's turn now to Michigan.
Yes, because this drives me crazy too. So
absolutely bizarre. So we're just going to start with the video without any context there. So let's just check this out.
Yes, my name Burhan Uddin Chaudhary.
All right. You have a ticket from August 2nd, 2021, 521 for Heman, for failing to keep the fence, walkway, sidewalk, or alley free of weeds, trees, or other nuisance vegetation.
By the way, behind the warehouse at the Corolla Studios that is maintained by Caltrans in Glendale,
that would be an improvement.
It looks a lot worse than that.
Oh, absolutely. This would be a step up. I would love that.
Oh, this would be a cleanup of that area, by the way. And by the way, Lebanon Alley at any one time behind the fire engine building looks a lot worse than that. Or go down 9th Street by the freeway and take a look at that, or come off Wilshire sometime and take a look at that. Mind you, all public, governmental, maintained areas. But yeah. Go on. It frosts me.
Can't help ourselves.
The first offense, civil infraction, you can plead responsible with an explanation, or not responsible.
Explain what. I am a cancer patient, very old, ma'am, and I am a cancer patient. I was then very weak, and very weak, and this time of rainy season, I cannot look after this thing.
Be ashamed of yourself. If I could give you jail time on this, I would. The fine is $100. Pay it by February 1st. You better get that cleaned up. That is totally inappropriate.
Oh no! Sorry, ma'am. Didn't understand. Like we have to pay $100 by February. No, ma'am. No, ma'am. Oh, okay. Like, is it, ma'am, forgivable because my father is currently sick, and we cleaned that after.
You see that photo?
Yes. I am very sick, man.
That is shameful. Shameful. The neighbor should not have to look at that. You should be ashamed of yourself.
Yes, I am sorry.
So for anyone who was having a little trouble with the audio, it was a court hearing. It was a judge who was assessing a $100 fine to an older gentleman for the weeds that were growing in excess, if you're just listening, all around the sidewalk of his garage.
Yeah, the older gentleman, by the way, is apparently fighting cancer, is wheezing, as you can hear, having trouble breathing. But apparently in August of last year, it'll be interesting to know if there was any kind of COVID restrictions. He's getting fined, and she wishes she could give him jail time because the neighbors should not look at that.
Yeah.
It's welcome to America 2022.
It's absolutely bizarre. And, it's just, you hate to see it, but there we are.
Yep. Welcome to America. Thank you. Thank you all. Have a great weekend. Gary, thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
It's a pleasure.
As always, we appreciate it. Thank you, Mark. You have a great weekend as well. Bye-bye.
See you, GPS. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Beyond a Reasonable Doubt. Stay tuned for more bonus episodes coming soon.